विष्णु गुरुदेवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. सर्वप्रथम namaste to everybody assembled over here. A special namaste to residents of Belgavi, the holy city of Belgavi, where we have this institute academy ACPR started by Gurudev back in 1924, located in this holy city. So a special namaskar to everybody from Belgavi. A special thank you also to all the organizers for giving me this opportunity. It's truly very overwhelming. I really had no idea what I was getting into when I accepted your invitation. And today I feel like somebody playing school cricket is now suddenly sitting here playing a test match. So I hope you bear with me. I wonder sometimes whether, it must be something I must have done in my previous birth, some punya karma I must have done in my previous birth, that I got this rare privilege today to stand in front of you. I also know that I am actually in between you and your lunch. So I'll try to stick to the time and let's see how it goes. It's not a very big presentation, no need to take any notes. I will be leaving a copy of my presentation with the organizers. I also have my own contact details towards the end. So if anybody wants, they can actually request a copy. So right now, just focus on what we are going to discuss. Now, before we come into the proper topic of doctrine of karma, I think a very brief introduction is in order, because that's going to have some bearing in the way I am actually tackling this topic. So when it comes to Shri Gurudev, what we have to bear in mind is that Shri Gurudev is not only a thinker and a philosopher, but somebody who has spent the most part of his time in meditation and devout contemplation. So to quote Shri Radhakrishnan, we talk philosophy, Shri Gurudev actually lived philosophy. To Gurudev, the Atman, or the ultimate reality, was not something to be merely thought about or casually felt, but something to be realized by constant meditation on one's whole being. Shri Gurudev's endeavor was to approach and grasp reality that way. Now, so far as the benefits of this were concerned, it was obviously very soul-fulfilling for him, but that was not all. The joy that he experienced was so overflowing that he had to find channels of communication. So all his grantha that we have today are actually a result of the overflow of the joyful ecstasy which he has experienced. And he has expressed that ecstasy in a very logical, lucid and very clear language. So that is something which we need to be conscious of as we tackle this topic on the doctrine of karma. I have intentionally put here at random lots of themes. Most of you are philosophy students. I am not a philosopher by qualification, but as you will appreciate, when it comes to philosophy, there are a lot of themes that the philosophy world actually encompasses. We talked about mysticism, metaphysics, stoicism, hedonism, pantheism, and the list can be quite big. In fact, if I were to multiply this list by 100, even then it would not be a full list. So what we are actually going to talk today is only on one aspect of this large sort of repository of philosophical themes, which is the law of karma. Now, as we said during the introduction, no matter which branch of philosophy we select, when you look at the writings of Shri Gurudev, he very lucidly and very clearly has only one objective. And that objective is to show you how the Atman, or the ultimate reality, can be realized. That is his main focus. So in exploring the law of karma, we will have that perspective. And that was the reason for my introduction. So we will highlight this objective of how to realize God for oneself and for others through the doctrine of karma. So let's first get some definitions out of the way. Uh, when we talk of doctrine of karma, we talk about three categories of karma: sanchit karma, prarabdha karma, and kriyaman karma. The sanchit karma is referring to the accumulated actions from the countless past lives. Prarabdha karma is that portion of the karma which has now begun to bear fruit in the current life. And kriyaman karma represents the actions that we are performing now. Now, when it comes to karma, I think most people are sort of familiar with this concept, ki karmi so bharni, as they say. So whatever we have done, we have to suffer either the fruits or the losses, depending on what action we have actually conducted. So far as the actions are concerned, it is inevitable. We cannot escape the law of karma. So that is something which everybody knows, and most of the time that is where we sort of stop. We say that is what the law of karma is all about. Whatever we are suffering today, whatever we are happy today, it's because of something that we did in the past. So that is a very commonly understood concept of karma. But there is a sort of a criticism, you can say, which criticism of Indian philosophy in general, which Gurudev has pointed out in his book Kannada Literature, where he says a few critics of Indian thought hold that his doctrine smacks of the denial of freedom. The doctrine, according to them, preaches determinism and consequently a kind of fatalism. And then he expands on the same theme in another book of his called Pathway to God Hindi Literature, where he gives an example of Duryodhan. There is a very famous slok from the Pandav Gita, Janami dharma nacha me pravrittihi, janna me dharmam nacha me nivrittihi, kenapi devena rudhi stitena, yatha niyokto asmi tatha karomi. So in short, what Duryodhana is implying here is that he does not have any freedom and that it is God who makes him do all evil deeds. So that's what is Duryodhana's position. And therefore, he absolves himself of all actions. He says, whatever I'm doing today, whether it's good or whether it is bad, is something which is all predetermined, it's all predestined. I don't have any control on it. And so I'm free to do what I want. And therefore, that's a kind of a criticism which is generally done about the doctrine of karma. Now, what we are going to actually now cover through the writings of Gurudev Ranade is how this criticism is not valid, and to what extent is it valid, and what is the way out. So one of the things which Gurudev also acknowledges is that this criticism to some extent is true when it comes to past actions. For example, it is difficult to control what has already happened. A sanchit and prarabdha karma is difficult to control. But so far as the present action is concerned, the kriyaman karma is concerned, nobody has taken that freedom away from you. You have the freedom to actually choose how you want to do the kriyaman karma. And again, to quote in his own words, whatever I have written here is all from Gurudev's granthas. So to that extent, it's just dedicating it back to Gurudev, what is already his. He says in his book, we are the architects of our destiny. So far as the future is concerned, we are free to determine it as we desire. And Gurudev's desire in all his books, in all his writings, is basically how can we realize God, not just for oneself, but also for others. So that has been his sort of mission and goal. And that's what he actually wants to emphasize through Kriyaman Karma. What can we do to achieve that goal? So this will be the focus for the remaining few minutes that I'll be here. What we will be looking at is a few concepts. Indian philosophy is a large subject, but we'll select some 7 topics here, and I'll very, very briefly cover each one of them. We are talking about eternal moral order in the universe. We are talking about goal of human life. We are talking about place for morality, psychology element, the spiritual teacher's role, the role of the divine name, and role of grace. Now, given the time that we have, so we just want you to view this as building blocks. I will just touch upon each of these very, very briefly, But I think you will be able to soon join the dots and understand how this whole thing, when put together, actually provides you some kind of a direction in terms of what a Kriyam and Karma ought to be like. So we'll start with internal moral order of the universe. Here, basically what, we heard this quite often, that we see in our real life also, sometimes we see that good people, despite doing all the good actions, are suffering. And sometimes we also see that people who are actually not performing good actions, who are actually quite bad, you see them to be very successful in the material sense. And often a question can come as to how can we justify this? So that doesn't seem very fair. And to which the sort of a solution, you can say, from Indian philosophical point of view, is that we have to assume that there is a cycle of life, cycle of birth and death. So it is possible that even if you might appear to be doing bad things now and still being successful, at some stage in future, you have to pay the price for it, and vice versa. So this kind of a judgment has to be done by somebody, and that judge is actually God. And in fact, this is something which is also very famous in philosophy. The German philosopher Kant has used this sort of a theory to justify his proof of existence of God. So basically, we are talking in terms of a moral order, an eternal moral order, which has to be in place, and we are introducing the concept of multiple births and deaths, cycle of births and deaths. We then talk about the goal of human life. There are a couple of interesting autobiographical references from Gurudev's life which are worth looking into. Back in 1912, when he was quite actually young, he was a student at a Deccan college, he used to maintain a diary, and on one of the days in that diary, that was his birthday, 26th birthday, he has made an entry. Entry is quite large, but I just shown here a small extract of it. He writes that, I wonder how people set themselves earnestly to do the same things every day without any notion of what will become of them when they will have to quit this body. What is to be the goal of humanity? And then he actually goes on to be more specific. There is an essay called Vindication of Indian Philosophy, published in fact by ACPR. In that essay, he actually expands on what that goal ought to be from an Indian philosophical point of view. I think it's worth reading the original sentence because it's pretty impactful and deep. It also shows us what the Indian philosophy is all about. He says here that the rishis themselves gradually evolved out of their speculations this great truth of truths, that there is an Atman and that he can be realized, that this Atman is God, that the universe, like the human body, is a covering of this Atman and is in fact Atman himself. Then he goes on to say, upon this great truth stands or falls the whole philosophy of India. However different might be the different molds in which this great truth is put, this is the great motor idea of all orthodox Indian philosophy. So he's talking about God realization, the existence of Atman, and the fact that we can realize the Atman is basically what Indian philosophy is all about. But then the question arises as to, it's still very abstract, what exactly, why should I realize the Atman? And that could be a legitimate question, to which again he answers that question. There is an essay which he has written called Evolution of My Own Thought, which is again a very autobiographical essay. In that he mentions that what is it that induces a man to perform actions. And basically, if you get some happiness out of conducting an action, then only you are going to do that action. So he is talking about happiness, differentiating between great happiness and small happiness. So great happiness consists in seeing, hearing and meditating upon the Atman. Little happiness consists in seeing, hearing and meditating upon other things besides the Atman. In fact, our last speaker for tomorrow is going to be Shankarlaji Sudhar. He is probably going to talk a lot about his great happiness. which you will hear from him tomorrow. Even in the earlier presentation, we heard about different categories of happiness and bliss, etc. So it is that happiness which you have to experience, which actually only then becomes an encouragement for you to perform those actions which are going to give you that happiness. There is also the important concept of morality when it comes to Indian philosophy. Again, there's a lot of discussion on morality in the presentation that we had so far. But when it comes to morality, we talk about ethics, axiology, virtues, and it's a big topic in itself. But when it comes to morality, as I think Mr. Balaganpati also mentioned earlier, we are talking here about a concept of super moralism, something which is transcendental, going beyond the tribunas. So, what Gurudev is mentioning during one of the conversations that he had with his disciples was, whatever we develop our insight into God's nature and enables us to realize Him is moral. Everything else is immoral. So whenever we are talking about Kriyama and Karma, we have to constantly ask ourselves, is this particular action helping me to realize my goal? And my goal is to realize God. If so, then that action is moral. If it is not so, however good it might look on the surface, it's only a superficial morality. It's not morality in the context of super moralism. So that's the concept of morality again. We are talking, all these examples that we're taking here are just to highlight the point as to how our Kriyama and Karma can be different and how that helps us to achieve the goal. There is also the element of psychology in Indian philosophy. In case of psychology, again there is an entry in Gurudev's diary that he used to maintain in the Deccan College, where he talks about justifying how a person's actions result in his character. So he is saying about the circumstances in which a man is born and bred, added to the residue of feelings from a previous existence, go to form and fashion the character of the man. Every act that we are doing in the present in a similar way will influence our future character for good or for ill. So to some extent, whenever we come across a situation where somebody is not behaving properly, and it's very easy to get irritated with that person, but if you look at it from a slightly different perspective, that if you just give him the benefit of doubt, say that look, something he has done in his previous birth or in his previous life that has influenced him, and that is the reason why he is behaving the way he is behaving now, then suddenly you start having some kind of a empathy and compassionate view towards him. And similarly, what we do now is going to actually influence our character for future. We earlier talked about Sanchita Karma. Sanchit Karma, one way to look at Sanchit is sort of accumulation of actions. But it's very difficult to visualize it that way. What Sanchit Karma actually is not accumulation of actions, but the accumulation of the imprints that influence your character that actually is stored under your Sanchit. So tomorrow if I behave in a particular way, it's because of the imprints of whatever action I might have taken, which has influenced my character, and that is now influencing my action. And similarly for Kriyam and Karma, whatever I do now is actually leaving imprints, and those imprints are going to influence my future character. So that's a psychological perspective. A lot of times we talk about Chitragupta as somebody like a divine recorder who is recording everything that we are doing. It's a very commonly sort of understood theme that we hear from our childhood. But what here, there was a very ardent disciple of Gurudev by the name of B.R. Kulkarni, who has actually made a very critical observation. He is saying that Chitragupta is not somebody who is a divine recorder sitting in the heaven. Chitragupta is actually within ourselves. So whatever action that we do, good or bad, in the form of modifications, it goes and registers in your brain cells. Brain paths are created, and these traces make easy a subsequent action, good or bad. So it's like, if I say that I'm going to stop drinking, for example, and if you make an exception, and let's say if you still drink, the next time you're going to say, oh, nothing happened, it's fine, I can take another exception. And you keep making those exceptions, your brain paths are now created which force you to do those things. So therefore, it's very one has to be conscious of these kind of brain paths that get created. And similarly, if you want to do good things, automatically your character molds in such a way that you keep doing those things which are good. So that's again a psychological element which is relevant from the point of view of Kriyam and Karma. we'll cover 2 or 3 points quickly. Role of spiritual teacher. The role of spiritual teacher, uh, Gurudev is very candid. In the context of Paramata Sopan, he very clearly states, if God realization is your goal, without spiritual teacher, basically you cannot do it. It's as simple as that. So importance of spiritual teacher cannot be overestimated. Similarly, we earlier heard about characteristic of Sadguru. A Sadguru is somebody who not only realizes the goal himself, but can help you to realize that same goal. There are so many things we heard in that morning bhajan also. Some of you who are disciples of Gurudev will be very familiar with this. Guru ha dakhavi nija dhana or apana sariti karitatka. These are all sort of characteristics of Sadgurus. Not only that, talking of freedom of Kriyaman, we earlier talked about characteristics of a Sadguru. There was a very interesting meeting between Gurudev and an American philosopher, Professor Birch, in Mumbai, where Professor Birch was actually quite overwhelmed when he heard from Gurudev that it is the disciple who has to choose the Guru. Lot of times we fall for this Bhondu gurus or false gurus and Guru Dom, and people try to influence and make you his disciple. But here actually what Gurudev is saying is that a disciple has to identify a person, ensure that he has got the right characteristics of what a Sadguru should have, and it's the disciple who has the freedom to actually choose a Sadguru. And last but not the least, even when the Guru is not in physical form, particularly in situations like today, where we have full faith in Gurudev as God, but he is not in physical form, Gurudev assures us that even if the Guru has departed, he still remains at the back of all his disciples to protect them and to further their spiritual endeavors. This is a letter which he actually wrote when his disciple, the Sri Ambura Maharaj, both of them were disciples of Shri Bhushan Maharaj. When Ambura Maharaj actually left this mortal coil, he has written a letter in which he is stating that he is still there to protect. So that is something which one has to be aware of in order to not have any wrong kind of superstition. We then move to the role of the divine name. We heard about divine name in the earlier presentation as well. Basically, what the meditation on the divine name achieves is to erase all those karmic imprints. We earlier talked about our imprints which are stored in our sanchit or our prarabdha, and what Namasmaran does is actually it erases those karmic imprints, and that is the main role of the Nam. Now this Nam is given to us by a spiritual Guru who is himself a realized saint. He gives us a divine name, and the methodology by which we actually meditate on God is the only way to achieve God. In fact, it's a very telling sentence in Nitya Nimavali. He says, ईश्वराचे नाम घेतले असता रूप सहजच प्रकट होणार आहे. अहर्निशी नाम घोकेले असता देवास भक्तापासून अन्यत्र जाताच येत नाही. We then move to the last point in the few things that we selected from Indian philosophy, which is the role of grace. In the role of grace, basically if there is grace, then all our accumulated karmas, whether it is in sanchit karma or prarabdha karma, even prarabdha karma, those karmas which are now started to begin to yield fruit, if there is a Guru's grace which you can acquire through meditation, that also actually can get erased. Saint Eknath and Saint Umdi, which is also Maharaj, used to say that by the grace of God, effects of even prarabdha karmas might be destroyed. But for that, of course, you have to meditate. It's commensurate with your effort. Depending on how much effort you make in the Kriyaman karma, grace will come. There is a Karunashtak which Gurudev had written and he had sent to his Guru, in which there is a sentence saying that Sutena kata bhogalyavina bhoga pari sarvada nama ichi abhanga. So whatever is in the prarabdha, you have got no choice but to suffer. But if you continue to meditate despite that, then that grace will come through and even our prarabdha karma would be destroyed. In conclusion, so again we started off saying that as per doctrine of karma, there is everything is predetermined, everything is predestined, there is no freedom, and you have to suffer the consequences, etc. But that is true in case of only past actions. In case of future actions, that is indeed not the case. And so basically, it's in our hands. God has given us autonomy. Man has the freedom to choose a Sadguru. The Sadguru need not be in physical body. Man has the freedom to live well, to live dutifully with devotion to God. He has the freedom to meditate devoutly on the divine name. He has the freedom to seek grace. He has the freedom for a spiritual endeavor to bring about an adjustment between merit and reward here and now. In conclusion, we would take a quote from the Bodha Sudhe, which are basically vachanas of Gurudev's Guru's Guru, which is Shri Nimbarki Maharaj, where he talks about to be born as a human being is a rare blessing. One has to pass through countless cycles of births and deaths before one is born as a human being. This human life has been bestowed on one as a reward for some small act of benevolence and good conduct towards others while passing through the innumerable lives. But this human life will never be regained if again the same sinful actions are committed, the three possessions, women, wealth and land of others are hankered after, and the six passions are let loose, and this life is wasted in useless restlessness without realizing self. Hence, this excellent human body should be utilized in the best way as long as it exists. So, with that, I would like to once again thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and I wish the seminar full success for the remainder of the days. So, thank you.